folks, welcome back to my channel, and for this video I'm going to be looking at a book that I have not long finished, and it's actually a book that I had managed to get for Christmas last year. And the book that I'm going to be talking about is called The Toy Makers, and it's by Robert Dinsdale. And I have to admit, I do actually really like the cover. It's kind of very simplistic, kind of to the point, very atmospheric, and yeah, it has that kind of a bit of a kind of darkness to it as well, which I do think just highlights that slight darkness within the book itself. So I will be going into a bit more depth about the book in a moment. Before I do that, if you are enjoying my channel, if you are enjoying my videos, if you can click on that subscribe button, click on that notification bell, leave some likes, leave some comments, it's always really appreciated. And if you'd like to support the channel further, I will post a link to the channel's ko-fi.com page in the description bar below, and in a pinned comment in the comment section. So to actually get on to the main topic of this video, The Toy Makers by Robert Dinsdale, it starts in 1916 and the story itself spans for about 50 years. I think it's just under 50 years. I think it's something like 48 years. But again, it pretty much kind of spans like the first half of the 20th century. And the story itself starts with the main character, Kathy, who she again is living in this weird kind of rural seaside town, and she finds herself pregnant. And again, you have to remember, this is in the Edwardian era, when women weren't supposed to get pregnant before they got married. And so this was something that was very much kind of frowned upon. It was very much seen as being something that would bring kind of judgment on the family, that people would say it as being a kind of as a scandal essentially. So the whole premise at the start of the book is that her mother is wanting her to go away off to some boarding house where she'd have the baby, and essentially the baby would be adopted and Kathy would essentially be robbed of her child. But it gets to the point where Kathy's obviously wanting to escape that fate. She's obviously not wanting that to happen. She's wanting to keep her baby, and miraculously she comes across an advert in the paper which tells her about Papa Jack's Toy Emporium. So she essentially runs away to London and essentially shows up at Papa Jack's Emporium looking for a job, and it essentially kind of follows her adventures from there in her interactions and relationships with Papa Jack and his family. So he's got essentially Papa Jack owns a toy emporium in London, which is very mysterious and seems to be full of magic. And it's kind of, obviously, it's a toy emporium, it's full of toys. It opens essentially just over Christmas. I think it's from the first frost before Christmas. It was from the first frost of winter to when the first signs of spring appear. So that's probably kind of, I think it'd be maybe a couple months on either side of Christmas. And it is very much kind of has that air of the magic that we all felt about Christmas when we were kids. It's the lights, it's the colours, the music, it's about the presents, and then there's just that whole kind of sense of magic and otherworldliness that you get at that time of year. And it's all essentially distilled into this shop. And I don't get the impression that the magic system is Robert Dinsdale didn't go into like loads of depth about explaining the magic system. I think there is something of an explanation given, but it's not overly explains definition of how the magic works. But I think that adds to the mystery and the kind of the magical aspect of the book itself. Is you're never quite sure of how it all works, but it just adds that level of intrigue, and it kind of, I think it also adds an aspect to the struggle of Papa Jack's two sons. It's Casper and what's that boy's name? Yeah, sorry about that. Actually, I had to get the name of the second brother. It actually totally slipped my mind when it shouldn't have. So there's the two brothers who are Papa Jack's sons. It's Casper and Emil. Casper's the elder of the two brothers, who seems to be more in tune with the magic that seems to be imbibed and kind of embedded within the Emporium. And there's Emil, who's also the younger brother, who seems to struggle more with the magic and trying to tap into what his dad and his brother seem to do so easily and so naturally. And it's the whole kind of the struggle between Casper and Emil is kind of quite an interesting thing as well, because both of them as characters, they are playing this kind of it's a long-running game between the two of them that they call the Long War. That is essentially they're using they're using toy soldiers that they have made, and Casper always seems to have the upper hand, and Emil is always struggling to try and one up his brother, which very much does sum up the relationship that you find between Casper and Emil. And you also kind of see it, that kind of conflict and struggle between the two brothers, not just in Casper's being so natural and gifted with it within the use of like the magic within the Emporium, to kind of create toys that people keep coming back and buying, but it's also seen within the fact that Emil was always trying to get Kathy's attention, was always trying to win Kathy over and essentially kind of win her affections, while Casper just was able to essentially win her over without any effort. It was just, they both end up just kind of falling for each other, and again that just adds to the whole kind of conflict between the two brothers. That Emil's always seeing Casper as being the one that gets it all, while he's left with the seconds essentially, and is left to kind of pick up everything else when things start to kind of fall apart. And I do kind of I also like the fact that they use the sense of magic within the book, that it's all about escaping what's going on and is trying to escape everyday life and the struggles that is faced, especially the fact that the toy makers, with it spanning the essentially the first 50 years of the 20th century, does cover the period of time that is essentially the First World War and the Second World War. So a very tumultuous, difficult period in history. And I did get the impression that a lot of the difficulties and conflicts that were seen being fought out on a kind of world stage was also being fought out within the Emporium itself. So it's almost like kind of creating a macrocosm and a microcosm. So it's kind of essentially kind of having a kind of everything that's been played out on the big stage is always being kind of played out on a smaller scale as well. And it's almost, I did almost get the impression that it's that need to escape, that need to find a happier time, to find a purer time, is almost the source of the magic. It's almost like trying to tap into the wonder of that we all had as children. That wonder of that we do, again, as I was saying earlier on, it does seem to kind of tap into that wonder that we all had about Christmas as kids, and the fact that the Emporium is only open essentially over the Christmas period does again play into that whole wonder of that time of year. And so it's like, I think I do kind of like the magical aspect of the book itself, and how it's just woven within, it's just essentially woven within the book and is not overplayed. It just flows within the story and just adds that nuance to what's going on. And again, with the toy makers being set during the period of like World War I and World War II, it does touch on the fact that Casper, who is sent off to fight in the trenches during World War I, while his brother is forced to stay at home and is told that he's not allowed to go off and fight, that Casper essentially comes back and is a changed man. He's not the man he was before, and he does have PTSD, and it's the way that Robert Dinsdale does kind of deal with that he does touch on the fact that there was that aspect of the war, and it's dealt with in a very gentle way, and but also shows the fact that it impacts on everyone that is around him, that it impacts on everyone's lives, and it's just that very soft, gentle way of essentially highlighting that aspect of war and conflict. So I did generally enjoy the vast majority of the toy makers. The only thing I think that let the book down a wee bit was the fact that I felt that the ending of the book was rushed. That essentially it was almost as if it was trying to tie all the loose ends together and trying to finish off all the different storylines and bring it all together and have it in all a nice little kind of neat bow. But it was almost as if he didn't have there wasn't enough time to actually write it or do it properly, or do it in such a way that they actually do it justice. Because I would have liked to have seen how the events of the end actually affected the characters as it was taking place and happening, because I don't want to kind of give away what actually happens in the end, but it's one of those endings that you know, it's like you know before it happens that there's going to be more happening at the ending than you would possibly suspect there would be, but it's just you know there's just something more that's going on, and I would have liked that to be kind of I would have liked to have seen that dealt with more, rather than it being rushed as it was towards the end of the book. And even though I would have liked to have seen the ending fleshed out a bit more, even though I would have liked to have seen more, it's just essentially, I would have liked to have seen it not as rushed as I felt it was. I do actually think that The Toy Makers by Robert Dinsdale is a good book. One of the things that I actually really enjoyed about it was the fact that each chapter, or each essentially covers a few years, and I felt that that helped kind of keep the pacing of the book up. It helped with making sure the book didn't drag or didn't feel like it was taking forever. Yeah, so I quite liked the way that that was dealt with and that was written. And I do feel like, even though the book does show that the Emporium does face its difficulties and does go through rough times and conflict, which I do think very much summarises and symbolises the 20th century and the destruction of the 20th century. And that there is still that kindle of hope, that still that kind of little beacon of hope. And I would very much say that that sums up the fact that, yeah, the 20th century is a very industrial century. It was very destructive century. But even though it may feel as if all the magic's gone out of the world, there's still that little spark there, there's still that little glimmer of hope that just needs that little bit of kindling to kind of to be brought back. So I kind of quite liked that as a message within the book, that the world is not as bleak as people might think it is. It's not as hopeless as people think it is. There's still that little glimmer of hope that can be found and brought back, and yeah, I kind of quite like that aspect. And yeah, so I would recommend it if you are looking for another novel to read. If you're looking for maybe something that's maybe more of an urban fantasy novel, because I would possibly say this is more on the urban fantasy side of things, because again, it's set in our world, it's set in the London that we all know, but there is still that element of the fantastical and magic. So get yourself a copy of The Toymakers by Robert Dinsdale. And again, with the night starting to draw in again a bit more, and we're all starting to possibly think about having cosy little nights in, and maybe kind of looking for things to kind of keep ourselves occupied during the darker months, this might be a good book to sit down and enjoy and read. So yeah, and again, it does say on the back of the book, which I kind of quite like, so if there was a toy shop on Diagon Alley, it would be The Toymakers, a dark, enchanting novel for the fans of the night circus and the miniaturist. So yeah, again, I've not read The Night Circus or The Miniaturist before, so as I did mostly enjoy this, or yeah, so I would say like 90% enjoyed this. I would probably try and get myself a copy of The Night Circus and The Miniaturist and have a read of them. So hopefully you will have enjoyed this video. Hopefully you will all be intrigued by The Toymakers by Robert Dinsdale. And hopefully, if you do decide to get yourself a copy and sit and read it, hopefully you will all enjoy it. And yeah, hopefully I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.